Welcome back to This is Freedom, a podcast where we talk about mental health, spirituality, and finding freedom in our lives. We join with guests to discuss topics that challenge our mental health and spiritual health, and we explore holistic ways of coping. Here we are sharing stories and inspiring a journey of freedom. This is episode 5. Today we have a very special guest. We have Jessica Procter, who is the owner of Good Health Naturally Oakridge. And she's a registered holistic nutritionist, and she'll be talking to us about how our nutrition is important for mental health. We'll be talking about supplements. I met Jessica when I was looking for natural supplements for depression, help with sleep and anxiety and different things. So thank you so much for being here, Jessica.
Thanks for inviting me. I've loved to connect with you in store, so it's fun to be doing this podcast with you today.
I know.
Awesome.
I'm finally getting around to it.
Yes.
So tell me a bit about the store and about your background as a holistic nutritionist. What is a holistic nutritionist, first of all?
Yeah, a holistic nutritionist is someone who is trained in nutrition, obviously, but instead of just doing normal nutrition, that I've taken university level nutrition courses as well. And there's a very big difference in that holistic nutritionists really, they look at the whole person, what's going on behind the scene, how emotional and physical and spiritual health really connects with nutrition and what we eat, why we eat it, and our overall health. So the practice of holistic nutrition wants to take in the whole person, not just the very chemical and very exacting level of nutrition that's important, but it's much more like the medical, clinical nutrition rather than the way a holistic nutritionist would see a client, if that makes sense.
So what kind of supplements do you sell, and which ones do you think are really important for mental health?
Sure. We sell all kinds of supplements, but a little bit of everything, I like to say, or I like to be that store that people are like, wow, I can't find this anywhere else. And I'm like, definitely. That's my favorite thing, is tracking things down. But for mental health, what I like to talk to people if they come in for anxiety or low mood or even lack of sleep, which can all lead to different mood disorders of some kind. We like to take a holistic approach in that we recommend basics. So I would say vitamin D3 is my number one, especially if someone comes in between September and April, where in Canada, we just don't get enough vitamin D3. People call it the sun vitamin. If you're not aware of what vitamin D3 is, it is the vitamin that when we get sunshine on our skin, our body makes it. But then that means that in the winter, or even in the summer, if you cover up or you wear lots of sunscreen, we're just not going to get enough. And it's directly impactful of our physical health, but also our mental health as well.
I take vitamin D. I take 5,000. I use a vitamin D3 daily. I've been doing this for 2 years. So vitamin D is interesting. It's good for decreasing inflammation, because inflammation is related to depression.
Yeah, so D3, it's anti-inflammatory. It is hugely important for tissue and bone health. So that alone, Canadians, even regardless of their mental health, since I'm on a podcast, I'm going to say you should be taking D3 September through April, regardless. But for mental health specifically, it is just when they test everyone who has especially low mood or depression, almost 100% of the time, they're very low in D3. And then when those folks are put on a D3 supplement, they're showing statistically higher levels of good mood. So better mood in general. So D3 is not something that you would take that is immediately going to cure anything, but it is, again, like I said before, one of those major building blocks that someone should definitely, and there's no interactions with drugs or anything like that. So it's very easy to go on and buy drugs, anxiety or depression medication. I don't know about all drugs, but mental health related medication. So it's a very easy first building block to explore for sure. Okay.
Yeah. So What was important to you about having this store in London? I just love to see millennials and just anyone who takes their education and what they've learned in school and just applies it to real life. And you fully just went out there and decided to own a store. So like,
Yeah, it's crazy. I always pictured myself owning one of those really crunchy health food stores I probably pictured myself in a small town. When I say crunchy, the typical very hippie granola type store. I always thought that someday, even as a kid, before I even thought I was going to go into nutrition, whenever I walked into like my small hometown store, I just thought this is the coolest store ever. And I always wanted to have that. So although in London, where I'm situated, I think I've got a really cute store, but it's not quite as crunchy as my younger self had imagined. But I was always drawn to the idea. And honestly, this opportunity fell in my lap. I'd been working in health food stores for about 5 years at that time. Um, and working at this particular one for 3 of those years and loving who I was working with, the clientele, and buying the store. I was given the opportunity and I wanted to turn it into something that instead of just being a health food store was an educational hub, was a way to connect with people and just check in with the community. And when people walk in the door, to make them hopefully leave feeling better. Not that we weren't doing that before, but I just thought, hey, I can take this opportunity and make it a more community-based, learning-based, bringing my holistic nutrition into it more than we had in the past. So that was my vision when I bought it.
because we're a society that's so used to these pharmaceutical drugs, when we hear about a natural supplement, we are not exactly sure how it works or what it does or why do I need to take this amount.
Yeah.
And so I like the fact that when I go to Good Health Naturally and I'm like, oh, I'm looking for this thing, and then we can have a conversation because I know that you have more information behind everything. And I think that it's really important to educate ourselves on natural supplements as well. Not that I'm saying that medication isn't important for mood or for anxiety. A lot of people do need these medications
For
to,
sure.
sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's long term, sometimes it's preventative. But it's medication can be used in combination with natural supplements, and sometimes you don't know how it will help you unless you try. And so for
Yeah.
me, learning, like, let me try and see how this is going to help me. For instance, iron, like I've always suffered with anemia. When you don't have enough iron in your hemoglobin, which carries oxygen, like there's not enough of that, you can feel so exhausted, right?
Yeah.
Say like when you experience depression, there is a level of lethargy to that, as well as feeling worthless and hopeless. And it makes me wonder if I started taking iron earlier in life, when I started to have those symptoms, if it would have helped, right? And I'm just glad that I've introduced more of this natural medicine into my life now. The iron supplement that you suggest.
Ferritin.
Yes, the ferret.
Ferritin.
Do you know any correlations or like about iron and mental health? Or what other supplements do you think would assist
For
people?
sure. Iron specifically, it's really cool because, like you said, I never want to promote replacing medication with natural. Like, if your medication's working for you, medication saves lives 100%. And the stigma around that, especially in some holistic health spaces, is really disappointing to see. So, whenever I recommend things, it's always, I literally, whenever someone comes in for anything, we say, are you on any medication if you don't mind sharing? Because then that would depend on what we'd recommend, because some things you don't want to take with medication. But iron, like you said, it is specifically related to anxiety. So someone who has low iron, especially women, when they studied this, especially women, were found that iron, like increasing their iron levels, helped them manage their anxiety as well. And if you have low iron, you really can struggle. You can feel lethargic. You also may have skin and hair problems, which for women can be a huge hit to your mental health. If your hair is thinning, or which I know a lot of women struggle with, then that has a huge impact on body image. And mental health is a whole wrapped up package of so many different levels. So iron, I would say, very cool. It is linked to anxiety specifically, but then also If you're low in iron, you just do not feel good, no matter whether you have an underlying mental health condition or not. That's what I would say about that.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that iron was related to that.
If you have anxiety and you have signs of iron deficiency, like really low energy, you're really like, if you are pale or more pale than you usually would be, because literally iron helps our blood be red. So if you're feeling like, or even just if you're a white person, your translucent skin is a sign of having iron deficiency. But if you are feeling lethargic, if you're noticing changes in your hair, skin, and nails, then you could, and especially if you're a person who bleeds, then it'd be great to go and ask for your iron levels to be checked out. One thing I would say is you do not want to just randomly take really high dose iron for long periods of time without knowing your iron levels, because it can store. We want it to store, but we don't want to get really high in iron either. If you are in doubt, then hopefully you've got a practitioner that will be able to test your iron levels for you.
And getting your blood work done to test for your hemoglobin levels and anything else can really help you determine what types of vitamins that you need, right? It's like a balance between medicine and natural remedies and diet and sleep and your supports in life and all these things. And you talked earlier holistic nutrition and holistic health involving the spiritual, what you think of spirituality and what that's been for you. And how does that relate to nutrition? It's something that I struggled with making the connections before, but as I got to know myself and my eating habit, I was able to make that connection.
I feel like what spirituality means to me has definitely changed drastically over my life. I was raised in a very Christian home and grew up going to church every week. And as I grew up and honestly moved to different cities, I would still come home and I still love going to church with my parents, but Christianity kind of turned more into spirituality for me personally. And I think that a deeper sense of something, whatever someone believes, a deeper sense of something bigger in life gives a lot of, I'm not even sure, a lot of comfort. And in, I would say nutrition falls apart when someone doesn't feel well, when they are struggling, when they are, dealing with hard things. And being spiritual of any sense usually helps you deal with hard things. And that is what I would say I see most, or with friends and everything. Obviously, you meet so many people in your life, and that is the main thing I would connect with spirituality and nutrition, is that when you are struggling the most with nutrition and you don't have a sense of something bigger than you, then it's hard to nourish yourself properly. So I think that not that everyone has to be spiritual, but I'd say if you have good spiritual health, it's easier to take care of yourself in general.
Yeah. I noticed, like, for me, if I was feeling distressed or disconnected from myself and forgetting the bigger picture, I really struggled with overeating. And that's something that I still struggle with sometimes. And I always find that I feel more balanced and more connected with myself. And I think that I can be more connected to God as well. I'm able to eat healthier foods. And I find that when I'm not so concerned or worried about the things I'm eating either, that I have a sense of peace. Because like spiritual well-being is really a sense of peace with yourself.
Yes.
And I find that when I don't feel that peace within myself, then I'm like running from McDonald's, or not that it's bad to have McDonald's, but not every day, or like for me anyways.
Yeah.
Usually it's a sign of stress when I turn towards food that will easily give me like a dopamine hit kind of thing. And just having better nutrition is usually a sign that I'm feeling more peace and more at balance with myself. And then eating healthy foods also contributes to your positive mental health.
It is a whole cycle. Yep.
It really is a cycle. And it takes a lot of intention to be cognizant of the choices you're making of what to eat, and to want to try more natural ways to to deal with emotion. And the things that we put into our bodies can either like support that or not. It's like, people will drink alcohol to numb or to become more free or loose or whatever the thing is, right? It has like relationship to how we're feeling and how we're showing up in the world. And people will eat cupcakes and eat cake to celebrate, or maybe to numb an emotion, right? So I find as the more I thought about it, the more I saw how the foods I was eating related to my mood. And then obviously your mood relates to your well-being and peace, right? And then to counter that, it was like, okay, if I'm more calm, if I take 10 minutes to do some mindfulness in the morning. Mindfulness is basically being able to be present in a certain time and to be aware of your body and your surroundings. When I was able to do that and to say, okay, this is how I'm feeling, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to go and eat this food that's just not good for you and then maybe feel bad after? Or are you going to eat something that's more nutritious? It's an everyday journey, and it's an everyday effort to be cognizant of how you feel and then how that might get connected to what you eat. And I also find that this is my last part of the ramble, but sometimes the way you grow up too, and how your parents or how your caregivers, their relationship to food and how they, if they're very restrictive or if they're very like particular on what you have to eat and when, and not eating this, that can get attached to you growing up, and then you can adopt those things. So like our eating habits, I find, is just so related to the peace we have within us and what we expect of ourselves more than ever. I didn't even know I had that much to say about it, actually. But
we could do a whole podcast with me. When I had clients, my main focus was always intuitive eating, or how intuitive they currently were, because usually a lot of different eating issues, whereas people are like, I'm a binge eater, or yeah, I just could snack all day, I'm never satisfied, or whatever. It tends to be around what we call intuitive eating, which is pretty much just exactly what you described. I love when you say spiritual health is just how in tune you are with yourself. I love looking at it like that instead of looking at it from just a purely like God, universe, etc. Standpoint, because anyone can know how connected they are with themselves at any current time. And I think that, yes, mental health plays a really huge role in our eating, how we nourish ourselves, because if we care or don't care about ourselves at a current time in our life, that impacts hugely how we treat ourselves every day. And what do we do every day? Eat, hopefully. Yeah, I would say my biggest passion, I think, in the nutrition space is just chatting with people about intuitive eating, listening to their body, choosing nutrition and supplements based on their unique person, and giving power back in that way. I think that anyone can say a certain supplement is good for all things, but I think it's really valuable to really look at the person, ask them, okay, how are you actually feeling after this supplement? Because one supplement, no matter how good it is not going to be amazing for every single person. So we're all unique. And I like to think of it that way as well.
I'm so glad that we have a place in London where people can go to learn more about holistic nutrition. But I also wanted to talk to you about freedom. I wanted to ask you about what kinds of things help you feel free. You had mentioned what it's like to be an owner of a store and kind of what your attitudes are towards just living life and managing the hectic life of an owner. Yeah, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So owning a small business, I like to say, is like having all of the freedom and no freedom at the same time, in the way that I completely own my own schedule. I don't have to be at the beck and call of someone else. But at the same time, my life has to be very much regimented because, again, I work in the store every day. I have to be here. I have to do all the things, boring and exciting, that come with business ownership. So, although owning the store gives me a lot of quote unquote freedom, I would say most of the time I'm a very introspective person and very outdoorsy person. My life outside of owning a store gives me a lot of freedom. I think freedom for me is a feeling. Like, I know when I'm pushing too hard at the store or I'm giving too much to owning a business. I will never, I don't think, be the type of entrepreneur that can give their all the time. I really don't have any interest in doing that, or at least I shouldn't say they're all, but 100% of all of their energy by that. So freedom looks like to me having the freedom to do the things that bring me joy in life. And although that is being in the store, there's a lot of parts of owning a business that do not make me feel free, but they've got to happen. So I'm okay with that. But I'd say being here, helping others, and then being able to go home to my pets and my person and being able to spend lots of time in nature because I've got a fairly free schedule certain days of the week because I create that for myself. That in all is what makes me feel free on a daily basis anyway, creating my own schedule.
I like how you say it's freedom. It's something that you created for yourself. And it sounds like you've done that by making those choices in your schedule to do the things that make you feel grounded and not stressed. Like, like constant masculine go. And that doesn't always serve us. There's a time and place for it. You organize and to like make sure you handle your admin and run the store. But then it's the balance between that and also feeding yourself and dealing with the pressures of ownership and what people might project onto you or whatnot.
For sure. If you, anyone listening, if you ever want to have a lot of opinions thrust upon you without asking for them, buy a business or start a business. For sure. But that's why freedom is so important in your own life, because if you don't feel like you're free to make your own life your own, then all of those opinions are going to weigh you down. So you've got to, again, take care of your mental health, to take care of how you feel in everyday life, or life is just a lot harder. For sure.
What would you say is your approach to negativity in terms of the ability to run a store? People will say, especially like the older generation, there's an older ideology about health and how we live life that's and maybe based on fear. But I think that it's important not to make decisions based on fear and more of hope. For me, that's how I have freedom, is knowing that I don't always have control. I can do what I can in the moment, but things happen serendipitously, and gives me freedom to know that I'm not the only person that's in charge of the ship, so to speak.
For sure. I honestly, I most of the time, older people who have, I do say older people because usually it is older than me, people who, like, I'm in my late 20s now, and to someone who is 50s, 60s, beyond, I still seem very young to them because technically I am. But I would say most of the time I deal with it with a smile, and because I don't subscribe. I know that's so cliche and so millennial of me, but I just don't subscribe to what they're telling me. So I don't believe it. I don't internalize it. And luckily here we get a lot of lovely people. I would say we have really no terrible interactions with customers in the way that I would have to protect myself or staff from like an angry person. But in terms of small comments, for sure, people are so scared for you, even if you don't need them to be. But I just like to think whenever we let the ego take over of, oh, this isn't going to work out, or something terrible is going to happen, or you're not good enough. We all have those thoughts sometimes. I just don't really let that happen. Or if I do, I check it immediately and say, it's not reality, because it's not. And like you said, I totally know my life, whatever that is supposed to look like, is going to look like however it is going to look. And I cannot control everything, because also there, I do believe in something bigger than myself, but also you can't control what other people do. So you've just got to be like who you want to be and let chips fall as they may. So that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's a very healthy way to deal with stress and to deal with this unpredictable climate these days. Like, we don't know what tomorrow will bring, right? We never know.
No.
But what we can do is we can choose to live our lives with a positive mind frame.
And these days, especially, it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even talking to other business owners, I just want to say too, I understand that I'm annoyingly positive to a lot of people. And I understand there's a lot of people struggling. And I don't want to diminish that with what I just said either. If you're really struggling in owning a business, I totally get you. It is incredibly draining sometimes. Or even if you, like, if it's not an in-person business, so you own like an online business or you're a coach or whatever, you've got a side gig, it's a lot of work. And so I just hope that what you take out of it is to take care of yourself first and hopefully fend off other people's opinions about what's going on.
Great advice. Great advice.
For sure. Yeah.
Just to wrap up, what message would you want to share to listeners about nutrition and its importance in mental health? And
so much. But if I was to say one thing, I'd say I hope that we gave you a couple tips today. But once you start going into the natural health realm, there's a lot of information that gets thrown at you. The internet is unlimited, and it's very in right now to be like a wellness influencer or be posting about that or being in that realm. There's a million people, some who have qualifications and some who don't. And I just would say, if you're dipping your toe in or you're already in this realm, don't let your health journey be another stick that you beat yourself with if you don't do a good job. So start small and make small changes. And really, like we've talked about a lot today, really notice whether those changes are making a difference. And if they don't, no matter who said that they're great for you, move on to something new and be kind to yourself, because we all go through ups and downs. I've worked with enough clients, and working in the intuitive eating realm, like you'll have someone who doesn't binge eat for a year and then something bad happens in their life and they go through crazy cycles, roller coaster cycles of not taking care of themselves. And that's all of us. So I would say, I know it's not very exciting, but start small and try to listen to yourself the best you can, and don't use a quote unquote failure to keep up with something new as like an indication of to be bad or hard on yourself. Anyway, that's like my least favorite thing to see. And so that would be my takeaway for if you're incorporating nutrition into your mental health practice. Just take it slow, listen to yourself, or when you're taking on all that new information, whether it be from a coach or just your own research, notice how it makes you feel and trust yourself before you trust anybody else.
I love that. Trust yourself before you trust anyone else. Wow, that's such great advice, Jessica. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in again to This is Freedom. This is episode 5, and I hope this conversation was helpful to you. If you'd like to hear more, please follow This is Freedom on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Podbean. Also share it with a friend. You can support this podcast as a sponsor, help with production, or be a guest. Contact information to reach out is in the show notes and on our website, freedommentalhealth.ca. There you can donate to this important project. Any help you give is so greatly appreciated. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Michelle Solomon. Take good care and see you next time.